Hello, Rebels of the Sherpalu. Normally, I start off this podcast by saying hi, but I'm going to start this one off by saying hydration. We know how important hydration is for our bodies. It's the thing that keeps us running, right? You want to be a well-oiled machine. You want to be running efficiently. You know what can help you run efficiently? Liquid IV. It is the category-winning hydration brand fueling your well-being, and the hydration multiplier is the one product that you are missing in your daily routine. It comes in a little stick that's a powder, and in just one stick, you get 5 essential vitamins and 2 times faster hydration than water alone. If you use it first thing in the morning, maybe before a workout, when you feel run down, maybe after a long night out and doing a little partying, you know what I mean? And even what if you have like a long flight or something like that and you just bleh, right? We all feel that way. Bleh. So add this to your water, and that convenient packaging can go with you anywhere you go, even if you're going to the gym or you're traveling or you're at work and maybe you didn't have a great breakfast. At least it's something that will fuel you up in the morning. And there's a whole bunch of flavors that are available, like sea berry, strawberry lemonade, Concord grape, lemon lime, pina colada, tropical punch, watermelon, strawberry, passion fruit, guava, acai berry. Did I say that right? I never know how to say that. But those are just some of the flavors. Here's some statistics for you folks. 1 stick of liquid IV in 16 ounces of water contains 5 essential vitamins, B3, B5, B6, B12, and even vitamin C. And we all know how important those B vitamins are. It's got 3 times the electrolytes of traditional sports drinks. It's made with premium ingredients. It's non-GMO, and it is free from gluten, dairy, and soy. I'm going to offer you a great deal, Rebels. If you go to liquidiv.com and use offer code Sherpa, you can get 20% off of anything that you order on that site when you're shopping for some better hydration. So that's Liquid IV. Check it out at liquidiv.com. Podcast that you're listening to is being presented to you in cooperation with the SJ Network. If you're a person who'd like to appear on a podcast, contact Stephen Joyner at s-j-network.com. Let's get on with the show.
It's the delayed episode of Too Many Podcasts. But if you're new to the podcast, you can get a feel for what happens on the show. Think of this episode as a Whitman sampler. But all of the chocolates have that yucky green filling. Okay, Lord Mr. Bruce, sound the gong.
Welcome to Too Many Podcasts, the podcast about podcasts. Now, podcasting from the Sherpa Chalet on Mount Podcastia, here's your host, Jim, the podcast Sherpa.
Hello there, Rebels of the Sherpalu. Welcome to Too Many Podcasts. It is the podcast about podcasts and so much more. It is me, Jim, the podcast Sherpa, your host, welcoming you to beautiful downtown Mount Podcastia, in the Sherpa Chalet, where I bring to you a discussion of podcasts and so much more stuff. So much more. Lots and lots of things. So why is this episode so short? I don't know. No. What happened is there were a couple of scheduling delays, unfortunately, and I've got some great guests who are coming on the show, or at least I hope are coming on the show very soon, and I thought that the episode was going to be launched this week. I could have probably played you a repeat, but I don't do repeats. Not until we hit episode 300. That's the plan anyway. Did I talk about that? Yeah, I think I did. Anyway, I'll bring you guys up to speed who are new to the podcast. So we've done well over 270 episodes. Yay! And we're doing quite well on the charts, believe it or not. We're popping up here and there on all sorts of international charts on Apple Podcasts. I'm really happy about that, and I really appreciate all the listeners out there throughout the lands who are putting us up there. And this being our season 11, after this season, we will actually be hitting our 300th episode. And I know Apple Podcasts, after 300 episodes, they start dropping episodes. There's some I might be actually getting rid of. But either way, what will happen in the next season is that I will be bringing you Sherpa Selects, and those will be some of my favorite episodes. And of course, if you have a request for a favorite episode for me to launch in season 11, you can do that and let me know. It'll be a lot of my older episodes from 2019, so long ago. And even some of the more popular ones that you guys have really been able to christen in my podcast episode standings. I will do those for you as well. But that's down the line, so we've got time for that. So again, it's going to be a little bit of a mini episode here, but I didn't come empty-handed. Naturally, I brought some Sherpa samples.
Now it's time for Sherpa Samples. If you've got a podcast you'd like us to sample, contact us, and we'll mention your name on the show.
And even though it's a short episode, we still got time for Sherpa Samples, and you know what that is. That's when I go up and down the podcast charts and check out some podcasts and let you know about them, so you don't have to do that. I'm a nice guy, I know. And you don't even have to pay me to do that. I'm doing it for free. For free. Nice guy, I know. So, oops, microphone is falling down. Here. Okay, there we go. Hey, we're much better now. So on the news end of things, we checked out two podcasts. One, the Ezra Klein Show. Ezra is a writer for the New York Times and an author as well. And the PBD podcast. PBD stands for Patrick Bet-David, who is also an author and CEO. In both of these podcasts, the discussions get a little political. I don't know which way you lean for your politics, but check it out and see if it's things that you agree with. Have a listen. The Ezra Klein episode that I listened to, it was an interview with Tom Hanks over a book that he wrote. And the PBD podcast, they interviewed a guy named Jeffrey Toobin, who was once the legal analyst for the CNN news network, who was fired after, well, what can we say delicately here? He was on a Zoom call and he was having his own personal employee recognition day. Yes, that's what we'll call it. Yes. And but it was a really interesting discussion that they had with him. Nonetheless, I beg your pardon. No, that's the name of the podcast. It is hosted by a guy named Nurse John, who is a hospital nurse. And he calls this podcast his therapy session for you. And I guess being a nurse in a hospital, he has seen and heard all sorts of stories. The episode that I caught, he was relaying a lot of stories from other nurses and of all the strange and spooky things that go on in a hospital. Blank Check with Griffin and David is a bad movie podcast. I know we've got a couple of those on the charts. I guess the premise is that some of these directors have successful movies, so the studio writes them a blank check so that they can do what they want. The movie that they discussed, I don't remember the name of it. It was a movie that was made in Korea, and it was very unusual, I guess. And they were discussing that, but that's really what it's all about. A lot of the obscure, unmemorable movies are made memorable in this podcast. And speaking of Monday mornings, was I speaking of Monday mornings? Oh, well, the Bill Burr Monday Morning Podcast. Bill Burr is an American comedian, for those of you who've never heard of him. His act is really kind of based, I guess, on rage in a way, kind of like if you've heard of the comedian Louis Black. They're kind of along the same lines, but very different styles. I like Bill Burr. I find him very funny. I also enjoy Louis Black as well. The podcast isn't exactly a replica of his stage act. There's a little bit of ranting going on, but really without that live audience to kind of feed off of. I guess it must be a little bit different for stand-up comedians to do podcasts like that. If you are a fan, you definitely want to check out this podcast. The Lowe Post is hosted by Zach Lowe, who is a sportscaster on ESPN. This podcast is about all things basketball, and Zach has lots of different guests on his show. A lot of different writers were on the episode that I heard, and journalists who are involved with the NBA. So there was a pretty heady discussion on all things NBA. So if you are a basketball fan, check out this podcast. The Really Good Podcast was hosted by Bobby Althoff. She's a young mother who I guess was very popular on social media. You know, let's look this up. Where exactly is Bobby Althoff known? We should look. I believe it's Instagram and TikTok. Because I was really trying to understand this podcast. What is she famous for? Let's see. For her deadpan humor and for intentionally making her interviewees uncomfortable. Ah, okay. Now I get this. See, I listened to this and I was like, this is a really awkward sounding interview, but he's intentionally doing this. And check this out. She has amassed over 5 million TikTok followers and 500,000 subscribers on her YouTube channel. Okay. Well played, my friend. Well played. Because first I was like, I don't really get what's going on this podcast. And just by reading that little description, all is well with the world. Financial Feminist is hosted by Tori Dunlap, wrote a book called Her First 100K. And of course, it is a discussion on all things finance. The episode that I checked out, she was interviewing a return guest on what the banks are hiding from you. Dun, dun, dun. And, okay, next up we have The Way I Heard It, which is hosted by Mike Rowe. Some of you in the United States may be familiar with Mike Rowe from his hosting of a lot of reality shows like Dirty Jobs. I think he was on Deadliest Catch too. I'm not sure. You can correct me on social media if I am wrong. And this podcast really started off with what he called historical mysteries, where he would tell a story and then at the end it would be revealed who this really was about and how it tied into actual history. This was included in a book that he wrote, I believe, called The Way I Heard It. And I think once he went through all the stories in the book, they kind of expanded on the podcast a little bit more and it got a little bit longer. And a lot of it was just a lot of conversations with his family and his coworkers. But to really hear the finest episodes of this podcast, check out maybe like the first 100 episodes if you want to listen, because that's really where they just kind of limit it to the stories. And the stories are really fantastic. And you really kind of find yourself playing along and guessing, like, who are they talking about? Sometimes you might know right off the bat. Sometimes you're in for quite a surprise. But he's Mike Rowe and he can do whatever he wants to. So if you want to talk about all sorts of stuff and talk with your mom, more power to you, sir. Lastly, this was a really interesting podcast, and it's called Under Cover of Night, and it's about a woman named Susan Knight. She was originally from Britain, and she moved to Texas, and I guess she lived a maybe kind of mysterious life, and one day she passed away, and she named someone who was practically a stranger to her as her executor. And as they started looking into her life, it turns out that there was a lot more to this woman than they actually realized. And there's CIA and FBI involvement and espionage and a whole bunch of other things for this relatively quiet woman who was living in Texas. Rebels, if you're looking for a good mystery, I would say this definitely looks like one that you want to check out. And speaking of checking out, I think we will check out right now with the outro.
Be a rebel. Follow the show at Sherpalution on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook.
Thank you so much for swinging by and spending a little bit of time here with me on Beautiful Mount Podcastia. We'll be back next week with a new episode, and I'm sure it'll be really exciting. I don't know which one it's going to be, though, but it'll be exciting, I promise. You can hear this show anywhere on your favorite podcast apps or on Sherpalution.com, where all of the episodes are, or on the Sherpalution YouTube page. That page has really been some of my favorite ones and some of the better episodes. I'm not putting every last episode on there, but just a bunch of episodes that I hope that you, the listener, will enjoy. It's just audio, it's not video, and trust me, you're welcome on that one. And if you like the show, if you could, please head on over to Apple Podcasts and leave me a nice review. And when we get enough nice reviews, what we will be doing is we'll be having a contest where someone, and it might be you, will win some podcast merchandise absolutely free from the Tea Sherpa shop. Ooh, just a way to say thank you to all of you for being really great listeners and rebels of the Sherpalution. I think that's all I got. So, Lord Mr. Bruce, I think it's time to head on out of here, this little teeny tiny episode, and I will wish you all a great week, and we'll see you next time. And until then, you know what I'm going to say. Viva la Sherpalution.
Thanks for listening to Too Many Podcasts. Please disperse. You can go home now. I said you can go home now. Viva la Sherpalution. Viva la Sherpalution. Oh. Yell, come back now, you hear?
You know, Rebels, if you've been checking out some of my promotional ads on social media, you will be aware that I have been using a lot of AI programs to help me create ads. But you know what? There's a lot more uses for AI than just funny little videos. And I'd like to introduce one of our new sponsors, Podium. It is a leader in creating AI tools for podcasters. Now, let's say you've got a podcast, or maybe you're even thinking of doing a podcast. You're probably wondering, well, how can AI be integrated with your workflow? I'll tell you about Podium. As a podcaster, you know that writing show notes and creating chapters and transcribing episodes takes a lot of time, and it can cost you a lot of money too. But you know what? That's where Podium comes in. It's an AI tool designed specifically for creators and podcasters with the goal of making post-production tasks quick and easy. And in just a few minutes, Podium generates show notes, chapters, summaries, clips for social media, a full transcript, suggested episode titles, social media posts, and more. Whew, that's a lot of work for one little program. Your show notes are key to your podcast's success because it helps new listeners find your podcast and they'll know if it's a fit for them. You know, kind of like Too Many Podcasts. It also improves your SEO, that's your search engine optimization. Ooh, big phrase there. And overall accessibility. And with Podium, you can focus on creating a great podcast and let Podium's AI do the heavy lifting. But Podium isn't just for solo creators and podcasters. It's a game changer for editors, producers, marketers, agencies, and production studios. Teams that use Podiums are able to increase workloads, decrease turnaround times, and improve their quality. How does it work? Very easy. First, go to Podium's website, and you'll see that link that's right there in the show notes. You get 3 hours free just to try it. Pretty cool, huh? And using that link also supports this show as well. And you know what else happens? Because I'm a good guy. You use my link, you will get 50% off for your first month. So visit the site, upload an MP3 file, and download your files, and that's it. And if you need anything else, you can use Podium GPT to generate articles and any marketing copy you might need in seconds. Instant show notes, transcripts, chapters for your podcast or channel. This will level up that podcast. So check out Podium today.